Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start with just some housekeeping duties or notices. The bathroom is downstairs, I've been asked to tell you that. Limerick Writers Centre are updating their mailing list, so if you'd like to add your email, maybe your updated email, to the list at the back of the room, that would be more than welcome. So, a good news to on us or then shutting up Carno Pery. Ihe on specialta fod. Benid Ekalura, Drello on Phila Tim Cunningham. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends of the Limerick Writers Centre, I'm honoured to be here this evening to MC this event to celebrate the life and work and birthday of Tim Cunningham. It's highly appropriate that we're gathered here in the Blue Room in the beautiful surroundings of the People's Museum Limerick, a place where the eclecticism of Limerick's rich history and culture is celebrated, themes which we will undoubtedly hear about this evening in some of the poetry that we will hear. Our first reader this evening is John Liddy. John will be followed by Thomas Lynch. Thomas, you're very welcome to Limerick and to Ireland. And then our final reader of the evening will be Tim Cunningham. And as many of you will know, Tim was born in Limerick and educated at C.B.S. Limerick. I hope you had a pleasanter time there, if that's such a word, Tim, than I had.
I had a wonderful time throughout my time with the Christian brothers, the priests and the nuns.
Very good. And Birkbeck College, London, said he moving quickly. Tim has mainly worked in education in Dublin, in Trowbridge, Delaware and Essex, and having recently returned to Ireland, Tim now lives in Westport, County Mayo. An energetic and prolific poet, Revival Press, the poetry imprint of Limerick Writers Centre, who have convened this event this evening, have published 5 collections of Tim's poetry, the latest being Passports in 2021. Tim's inspiration, he says, comes from Limerick, its people and its landscape. And we are really looking forward to hearing Tim read, as the third poet, the headline act this evening. As I said, reading with Tim are the renowned poets Thomas Lynch and John Liddy. This will be my third time introducing my good friend John Liddy this year. John was with us at UL in April on Poetry Day, and recently I had the honour of speaking at the Madrid launch of John's really wonderful, incredible book, Arias of Consolation. And again, in terms of the plug, there is a limited edition, hardback edition of Arias of Consolation currently available, and they are here sitting at the back of the room. John, as I suppose everybody in this room knows, is no stranger to reading in Limerick. Now living in the Spanish capital, Madrid, for the past 30 years, he regularly spends his summers in Limerick. And as I've mentioned, his latest collection, the wonderful Arias of Consolation, was published by Revival Press. So we might begin with yourself, John. Come on.
Lovely evening in Limerick to begin to start reading here. I'm very glad to be here in honour of Tim. Son-in-law, Roberto, Tim, happy birthday, and I look forward to listening to your poems, as I do Thomas Lynch, whom I've just met, but know his work, and it's wonderful work, wonderful. I'm going to begin with 2 short little pieces before I move to arias, and one of them is called Unity, and it's for David and David. A frontier does not alter the terrain. Marshall Proust. When north meets south and south meets north at a point in the River Bann, the precise meeting place is indistinguishable to a fish or a bird in flight. And the water, where the map says this is the line, tells a lie, divides and condemns you to differ, for it runs off your hands like familiar rinsing after a bout of weeding on one side or the other. When south meets north and north meets south, in the middle of a meadow, beneath a blazing sun, where two people reap a harvest of wheat, the map will tell you if you have crossed the line, broken a rule on one side but not on the other, the flattened stalks climbing to their natural height while you sleep in a no man's land together. And the other poem, walking with Pilar around where Machado, the Spanish poet, spent time in Soria, in Spain, and the news had just broke on the war breaking out in the Ukraine, and we were having a lovely time walking around the gardens and the area, and this is where Antonio Machado spent some time teaching. It was probably considered an exile from the plushier jobs in Madrid or Barcelona. But he met a woman there and they married. She was about 15 or 16, but died at 18. And she's buried in the graveyard there in Soria. And we went to visit the grave, and it's covered in wreaths. And the government of Spain has an almost annual wreath-laying ceremony to honour her and the poet. But Machado left Soria and then eventually was exiled into, as we know, into France, Collier, where he died. But the news broke about the war in Ukraine while we were walking around this area. And this poem is about this. Thinking of you. We walk amongst hundreds of names in a Sorian graveyard and stop to read Machado's words for Leonor. Wreaths from associations and government freshly laid on her tombstone. The poet buried in Collier speaks his lament with iris and rose picked from the plot by the Duero, where the poplars unbent with lovers' names, shapes as dates, grow out of its waters along with hill and verge, a world downside up, states of disarray, a silence before the kill, cities under siege, bodies stacking up, another exodus from far-off Ukraine, where life withers beside a buttercup as the river brings in a slanting rain, and we ascend to the warm parador named after the poet, our fingers in a love knot for the climb to our food and wine and coffee outdoors in the evening chill makes us almost forget the moment we are living in, but not so my dreams of a ghost with thousands of names and one.
Okay.
I'll delve into a bit of this, into the arias. I think I'll go for part 3. I don't think I've read part 3 too many times. I think I've done all the other parts, but not this one. So I'll go for this. And it's got a lovely self-portrait of John Shinners on this one. And I wonder why did John do that, but you can ask him yourselves. I know why he did it, because it's mentioned in the poem, actually. Anyway, part 3. Look for Da Vinci's bronze horse and drawing in the Hunt Museum at Custom House Quay, from where the famished and the blighted departed for Quebec on the bad ship Jenny in 1849, and from where I watched Bogan, McMahon and Shinners paint the scenery while a wharf of boats bobbed in the water and the windows of the tax office distorted surrealistically the bridge and hills of Clare. A picture postcard which John Hines' eye missed, an elusive gem like the handprints on the parapet of the Bishop's Lady, or the cries of woodcock near the dome, the eyesore for demolition, rehabilitation for what can be saved, a plaza for our own Swan of Erin, Catherine Hayes, a reality as real as Joseph O'Mara after a concert waving to the people from his balcony, the old dismantled, dissolving in memory like a 60-pound salmon gaffed in the mill race, certain words or enchorial breviary. I'll put the kibosh on you, said Granny Connolly, a kibosh Christoro Flynn would not be seen dead in, or Tor for Tory, the fearful highwayman who continues to cause havoc for our northern brethren with their crop shawling and consplacus derived from Canov shawl and consplake, interweaving on tongues like gossamer, forming its tangled mane of river cloak, hybrids used by bleachers, ball hoppers, crushers, dabbers, dingers, dredgers, scalpers, slingers, spacers and craw thumpers, who were only gagging for it with an obber in the gob, urging you to be wide of being nabbed by a gowl bag when cogging the ecker, a plate of crubines and a drop of the crater, gugus and praties served up by the banatee, eye bones and pigs' heads, or a juicy trotter, packet and tripe from Nonny Maher's, chips for the home stretch from Donkey Fords, the raw mash of our guff with a cock step on us, Alicadoo and Balk the robber, Chancer, Codger, Dosser, Gouger and Gurrier, who'd give you a fong, as in half fong, for gawking, whippersnapper, the stocious and the sculling of pints, plum-moss on a pissy bed for a plonker's piss-take, a shindig of gurk cakes on smidgens, fleck, flick, flake, flahuluk, faux pas and gatch, word flotsams brought in on the high tides to be twigged like a tapper on the cadge. The jury returned home from building post-war England, mouthfuls of avocado, guff, gov, gom, gawk and gaff, merging with the mariage, levine and smithereen, a toad of the relic, a brush of the gee, an ambush of a hussy in Drumkeen, a soft night of torrential downpouring, dal didy to the man of the house who claims he kept the pot boiling. There goes Dodo Redden, wheeling dogs in a pram, and Patsy Stark's coat and scarf in a portrait painted by Michael Collins, Frankie Flynn singing There Is an Isle, Mrs. Mac, beautiful, beautiful monsters, the fresh air gang going the extra mile for apples in the lemon field, the leap of the deer, a paddle in sandy where a boy floated head down in strangled sleep, paddy sausage in Marcella's Café Capri, Mixie in the Savoia, liver and chips in Dirty Dick's after a late show in the Tivoli, where Francis Coleman taps the ghosts for pocket money, while John the Man's bilingual radio limini announces obituaries with not one of our own, thank God. He's dressing down brigade and galloping maggot, the talk of the town, along with John Clancy's favourite Willie Moo, or Peter Francely's annual closing down sale, or the Masseret who looked after church grounds, or the piebald stampeding in Cals Park, dribbling past empty Guinness barrels drained from last night's revelry, or Hank on the door of the Old Tom, the crush outside the Royal, to see the Bermuda Triangle turned out to be a documentary. Or women refused pints by the Foleys, Ma Hogan and Nancy, or a man with a goose under his Gansey at Gone with the Wind. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all, said a lady to a friend who was shocked to find her chips disappear. Ding dong, church is empty, King Kong, cinema is full. Crackle, crackle, crisp, crackle, crackle, crisp, crisp, pork and beef, bun and oven, spooker and spocket, not a bother, Gertrude's leitmotif. As Limerick as Frank Hogan's 23rd Psalm, amidst the hurling flock, shepherding winning points between the posts without a qualm. How time clocks us all, but we go on, crossing the river by feeling the stones, as O'Tuma lifts his drinking song, lilts his drinking song from the bare place long the Naig, where mother swam the river's width, followed her Lyle uptown to Todd's before the fire, where she met her accompaniment from Tigonfania on Jamesborough Heights, and wove 6 patterns into the present, the strands of disparate designs, ealing through the different lives, under a mantle wrapped around us for the sharing, one of whom writes this for passing on to the guardian of abodes, surveyors of strange fields, inheritors of the baton. All that history in their pockets, according to Hartnett, black moons of misery, sickling their eye sockets, which made us deft at peeling an orange on the sly. And why wouldn't we, after 3 sieges, edgily return on the hinge to ascertain in a flash not one of our own? Acceptance once bona fides established, the headband of the tribe made known. The same the world over, from Lund, BC to Halong Bay, from Frisco to Tianjin, the Bowery to Pullman's Kilkee. Caution, suspicion and acceptance. The ace of hearts turned for all to see, after boxing and cutting the distance. Lessons learned when out and about, following the meandering fibro along untried terrain, the nagging doubt with unaccustomed weight of new tete-a-tete and its colloquial meaning, conflabs compared to what we grew up with, conundrums in our capacity to admit understanding is knowing the difference. A motto for humanity, my older brother is more than fond of saying, yet we'll return again to find Granny's intention still in the pond, Brown, Durack, Healy, Fiend's guitar, rockin' inside Flannery's rugby ball, Hockety, Allen on all the ladies fair, Neely knocking spots off the dog with Myler, Morris, Mick and Mary, Dave Geary covering Van's catalogue, drummers Darcy, Guido and Stevie Mack doing applaudable solos in the outback, a gig in Charlie's before hitting the sack, the piper done on the last house in Connacht, depending on what direction you're coming from. Sombre reflection with Pa O'Connor's lonesome boatman, waking the demise of croners, music makers, songsters from a bygone scene. But new talents on the horizon show never-ending musical and sporting promise in this community of unstoppable flow, of generations who still hear the heaving with Munster against the All Blacks, a shared glory and pride when achieving an end to a hurling famine with a team who brought the bacon home to Pigtown, made the breakfast shine, the dream prolong in a culture with facilities, a pulse to a parish heart, a tribal love of whereabouts once shamed by a consequence of family feud, fueled by media bias, quick to tie a whipping boy to a stem of a bridge, a radio wit's catchphrase, water off a soda cake, back we survives, connect to inner knowledge like the local feel of a cobble through expensive tackies, to remind us of provincial bliss with elbow room to move around its environs, lake, mountain, river and sea, a stone's throw.
Thank you so much, John. As you were reading there, I was listening carefully to the names of people, many of whom lived literally within a stone's throw of here. Dodo Redden lived just around the corner, if you remember, near her house was near where St. Joseph's scout troop used to meet. And of course, Joseph O'Mara, the tenor, sang from his balcony, just around the corner from here, down, looking right down to what we would now call Limerick Sports Store. No longer with us, actually. Limerick Sports Store replaced earlier this year. So thank you so much for that wonderful reading and a wonderful way to introduce the evening this evening. And as I said, if you haven't already read and engaged with Areas of Consolation, I really strongly commend the book to you. It's a major poem. And thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we move now to Thomas Lynch. And I'm really excited to hear Thomas Lynch reading this evening. Thomas is the author of 5 collections of poems and 4 books of essays. A book of stories, Apparition and Late Fictions, was published in 2010 to critical acclaim. His work has been the subject of 2 film documentaries, PBS's Frontlines, The Undertaking, which aired nationwide in 2007, won the 2008 Emmy Award for an Arts and Culture documentary. Thomas has taught with the Department of Mortuary Science at Wayne State University in Detroit, with the graduate program in writing at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and with the Candler School of Theology, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a charter member of the faculty of the Bear River Writers Conference at Walloon Lake in Michigan. Lynch's essays, poems and stories have appeared in The Atlantic and in Granta, the New York Times and in the Times of London. They have been published in the New Yorker, in Poetry and the Paris Review and elsewhere. He lives in Milford, Michigan, where he has been the funeral director there since 1974, and in Moveen in Cundian in County Clare, where he keeps an ancestral cottage. His latest collection, Bone Rosary, published in 2021, contains thought-provoking poems on life, faith, doubt and death that read like memoir, essay and story. Thomas, you're very welcome to Limerick, and we look forward to hearing you reading.
Well, thank you for that tastefully hyperbolic introduction. Vaguely obituarial in the way it covered all the highlights. It's nice to hear it in the present tense, so thank you very much. To the Limerick Writers Centre and to Dominic for the invitation to crash this Friday on this this rumor that your man is 80 years old. So I want to see the documents, as we say in my line of work. And it's tough to follow John Liddy. I must say, the rhyme between heart-knit and eye socket will keep me awake. Thank you for it. And for those R's, they truly are R's. So a well-titled book indeed. I think I'll read 3 poems, and some time ago when a former spouse, for reasons best known to herself, refused to travel with me, I hired a travel assistant, someone to send the corpse home if I should drop dead in a faraway place. And I think it could happen to anyone. And when the pandemic came along, she became my sort of connection to the outside world. She'd bring groceries a couple times a week and do messages, go to the post office and pharmacist, all the things that an old fart requires to maintain his uprightness, you know. And one day in September of 2020, she came roaring into the driveway, jumped out of the car and said, "I must harvest the basil because there's going to be a frost tonight." This is in northern Michigan. It could frost in June. But this was September, and she brought in these beautiful fronds of leafy basil and set to work making a pesto. But I took a picture of her with my phone, and when I looked at the picture, it reminded me of that painting. You all know it, is it Holman Hunt, of Isabella and the pot of basil? It recounts the sad narrative of Lorenzo, whose head is in the pot, and providing, no doubt, some sort of growth spurt to the basil. And anyway, the poem was the last one that I wrote that got into this book of new and selected poems. And when you get to be a certain age, and new and selected is the same as a collected, it might be, as Heaney said of his Human Chain, my last collection of poems. Then he said, no, my most recent collection of poems. It turned out to be along the lines. So this is called Careen Among the Fronds of Basil. I was so glad that it got in this book, like only months later. I said, that's a good turnaround for a poem. So I'll read it to you now and go from there. The leafy basil from the garden fills the kitchen with a whiff of summer's losses, and frames the figure of a prepossessing girl among these fronds saved from the coming frost. She adds pine nuts and olive oil, shredded parmesan, fine crushed bulbs of garlic pressed into a greedy pesto, boils pasta, as if the sky weren't actually falling. Hell and high water in one dire week, the bottoms falling out of everything, 200,000 dead of pestilence, my long-lost daughter Heather lost for keeps, halfway through a leap year, taking her leap into the beckoning embrace of the abyss. Desperate for good riddance, cold release, we got her home, alas, to let her go again. And good John Lewis gone to his reward, who stood upright on Black Lives Matter Plaza. No justice, no peace, our marching anthem. To see him crossing Edmund Pettus Bridge, bludgeoned, horizontal, and victorious. And word will come tonight of RBG, notorious for justice and dissent, equality of genders, loves, and sexes, against all poverties and contagions. Corrine upholds these end of summer leaves with gratitude against begrudgeries. This poem, do you know those calendars you get for Christmas from your godchildren that have a new word on them for every day of the week, and you're supposed to say this word over and over and impress your friends by noon with your command of, say, imbroglio, or words like that. Your friends will say he got another calendar for Christmas. One time this past year there was this word ekphrasis, maybe you know it. It's become sort of a rage in poetry circles. It's a poem written about a visual image. So I've taken a lot of photos. The phone makes it possible to take a photo of everything. Your meal, your tax returns, everything gets taken by the phone into an inventory of things that you'll never go through again. But that picture I took of Corrine with the basil turns up again in this poem, which is called Ekphrasis. I took this photo of Corinne last year and wrote a poem later the same day, which was the day she saved the basil in my garden from the frost she heard was nigh. Her standing in my kitchen holding those greens, the aspects of her, that look of longing, put me in mind of William Holman Hunt's old painting of John Keats's poem called Isabella, or the Pot of Basil, inside of which the head of Lorenzo, her murdered lover, was hidden from view. So we keep ogling Isabella, her languor and pining, her ample bosom, who has the face of Hunt's departed wife, who died in childbirth some months before he finished this canvas. It's an old story, refashioned by Keats from Boccaccio, the way all poets borrow, great ones steal, according to T.S. Eliot, that thief, or was it Picasso? God only knows. The way one image leads to another, the snapshot, the sudden spark, the seeing that brings something separate into being, the seedling becoming something the seed could never itself have quite imagined, connecting the bits of one creation to bits and pieces of another, the rooting, ramifying urgency that pushes the new thing into the light. The poem that I made that day became one of many in a book of poems called Bone Rosary, a collection of beads by which we keep track of being and ceasing to be, those living memories in light of which all we do is sit in silence. My daughter used to call me El Jefe when she was working at the funeral home before that saddened panic rose in her they diagnosed as schizophrenia, kept her estranged from us for 15 years before she took a leap from off the bridge in Marin County, California. The Golden Gate became her bitter end. My friend Joan painted a portrait of her. I hung it on the bedroom wall upstairs. We gather what we can of brokenness into a place where we might reframe it as restoration of a sort of wholeness in the horrid face of desolation. There's more to this, of course, but mystery wants more than anything, alas, our silence. So, back to the photo and the poem. Ekphrasis with a side of illusion, the senses and the imagination free ranging in the way they take their cues from life's long study and experience. A Colombian poet named Tallulah Flores, which I Englished as Tallulah Flowers, a plural noun or verb, it's hard to know. She asked, would I read some of my poems for their festival, Poem Rio, featuring poets of the Caribbean? Except for stays in the Lesser Antilles, Cancun and Caso de Campo, once I couldn't figure out why she'd asked me, but chose some poems to do with flowers, with gardening and growing things, with all Montbretia and rhododendrons. So Corinne among the fronds of basil became Corinne entre las hoyas de Albahaca. And when a visiting theologian spoke the Spanish version of the poem, for she in fact had worked the Caribbean in service of her church, the Anglicans, all the versions of it seemed connected. The mysteries of love and death and silence, the sound, the sense, the sight of timely harvest, the women in my kitchen and my poems, the beauty of their being and their gifts, whereby the broken heart is nonetheless still beating out its possibilities. A moment of balm, a tonic possibly, a romance involving flowers, their meaning, trees of knowledge, of good and evil, Romeo, Juliet, Flores and Blanchefleur, Adam and Eve. I'm living in a Leonard Cohen tune, involving a woman and a river, a distant country and the theater, something on canvas, cast in bronze, or song by which mammals discern the way of other mammals. Let us grant that it involves an island, a bridge, a ferry, a water crossing, an open grave, an empty sky, the sun, the moon, the loving body and ourselves alone. Sometimes the pool of sorrows overflows. Sometimes the shit that happens overwhelms, and still the unanticipated gift appears. That sudden beneficence beyond imagination. There it is. The moonlight in the bedroom window gives a glimpse of her naked and unabashed and hurling into your embrace with ease as if she came to reckon with your pain, the long years of damage and estrangement, the thankless, luckless, sorry circumstance of being yourself in the sore world, and these are surplus to requirements. Her willing body adjacent to yours, and her pressing herself onto yourself. An abundance much like grace itself is unearned and undeserved, much the same as creation's favor with its creatures, the fervor of lovers for lovemaking, the reverence for beauty and for being, the texture of longing touch exposes, or liberties taken in smallish doses, a sudden catch of the breath, a sudden seeing, or the way that Isabella's weeping never brought Lorenzo back, but greened the basil and beckoned the poets and the painters to make something out of such contingencies, the way Corinne could sense the coming frost, or hankering for pasta and pesto sauce, the common table shared, the table talk with fellows, neighbors, or passers-by, by which we get a sense of connections, a sense withal that we are not alone in our heartbreaks, longings, and bereavements, our losses, lacks of luck, the brief achievements we might be, with any luck, remembered for. I'll finish with a birthday poem. I've been coming and going for the last 50-some years to Modine near Kilkee, which we like to call Limerick at the sea. And so I've met a good few of your neighbors. And, but to be among poets, to celebrate the long and steady contributions of one of our own is a good gift to give. And some years ago, I noticed that I had quit writing a number of poems I thought I should write every year. You're supposed to do 11 to keep your card in the League of International.
Beautifully introduced and read and woven together. Thank you so much, Thomas. Wonderful. Wonderful. We're privileged to have you reading here this evening. So the reason we're here in this room is to celebrate the work of Tim Cunningham. And Tim, the man of the moment, will you come to the podium and we will listen to you read. He's a poet.
Honestly. Anyway, it's I'm so grateful for Dominic.
Go closer to the mic.
That's okay. Anyway, just saying I'm so grateful for Dominic and for the privilege of reading in such distinguished company. It should be a wonderful evening. I'll begin with, I suppose, the beginning for me. My father, I couldn't remember, was killed in the Second World War, 1944. He's buried in Bari in southern Italy, and that's my earliest memory. Is a memory of absence and picking all these things up from my mother. His letter. Opening the letter, words flew up like butterflies, exploded with rainbow wings. I part the 11 pages now, brittle as fallen leaves. Unbandage the past. he writes of where he is, of guard duty tinselled with frost, and stars like sixpences reflecting on his bayonet. Remembers where he was, his mother's fingers sculpting flower, his father's feet and his, welcomed through acres of neighbouring fields. Dreams of where he longs to be, alighting from the troop train, seeing his Venus's green coat appearing from a cloud of steam. And knowing the pencil's lead would sink in the page's white rapids, he asks her to rewrite his words in pen. Then the poem's pencil sketch of love, of life disappearing like wrens into a bush. I read his testament, follow the vowel and consonantal roads we might have walked, but mostly I watch her hand, observe it tracing faithfully the loop and line of letters, her pen climbing his wordscape, its warm ink intimate on pencil, like skin on skin. And if I'd been known for anything, I suppose I was lucky enough to get a poem included in Bestseller Poems, favourite poems from the south of Ireland, called Introit. And we just were mentioning a little while back about religion changes and so on in Ireland. You'll remember this, some of you. If you don't, it's something about your age. Introibo ad altare Dei ad Deum purificat juventutem meum. I will go unto the altar of God, to God gives joy to my youth. The stone steps of the church are smoother now, the stone steps slippery with Limerick rain. This was our theatre and concert hall, art gallery and, some would say, museum. First steps to the thrill of pageantry, gazing at the monstrance cope, the cloth of gold, dazzled by the multicoloured light of stained glass windows, their jigsaw saints. The Pieta was not Carrara marble, but still echoed that Michelangelo. The extracts from Epistle and Gospel knitted to our golden treasury. And Hamlet and King Lear had competition from the drama of crib and crucifix. Our priest actors, no less theatrical, in seasonal vestments, again, all male. A shy soprano in the gallery could dream a Traviata at the Met. All this and the comfort of belief, youth gifted with the joy of possibility, beckoning to feet on two stone steps slippery with rain and holy water. And when I wrote this, before I come across John, I thought this was a long poem about Limerick. It's called Siege. I love that city, as if hair fell soft about its shoulders, as if its eyes were lakes of naked joy, and its voice the music of spring. I was no William outside its walls. My feet caressed the pavement like a midnight skin as I searched for the breach where love could penetrate. I told the stones about my love, and the tongue in the stone was silent. I love the heat-hay summer's forging blood, hot as the shoe for Sarsfield's horse. He held the wall, I held my heart like a roasted apple. I told the fire about my love, and the tongue in the fire was silent. I love the streams where the salmon of knowledge swam, and Shannon's rippling shoulders that bore friendships a treaty late. I told the river about my love, and the tongue in the river was silent. I love the wind flapped down through history by wild geese wings, and the breeze that rushed round corners as if late for mass. I told the wind about my love, and the tongue in the wind was silent. And someone in that city had hair that fell soft about her shoulders, eyes that were lakes of naked joy, and a voice the music of spring. Does anybody remember learning in school Valparaiso? Honey Lungo Valparaiso. Yeah. But I love the name. Wonderful, wonderful name, yeah. Honey Lung of Valparaiso, Polly the Broom. I had a grandaunt, very talented, at a time when there wasn't much you could do about it, and she had a beautiful singing voice. And she told me this about an opportunity when she was a child. Valparaiso, in the beauty contest of words, she would have been queen, exotic, enticing with Svengali vowels. I thought of that ship from Valparaiso, watching my aunt at the kitchen window, combing her mermaid hair, still black as the coal in the tea chest by the fire. Her thoughts always travelled back to the carefree child running with ponies at Adair's open fields, splashing with her fields in the majestic splashing with her friends in the majestic Mag, singing in the choir at Sunday Mass, where two Americans heard a voice they felt could one day grace the Met. Then that whispered conversation when everybody thought she was asleep. But their ship sailed starboard home without her. For me, her Pennywell kitchen with the Met, her Kevin Barry would melt a hangman's heart, and the sun never set as gloriously as when she sang Galway Bay. With the voice of a lark, she sang through tears the unheard repertoire, the unacknowledged side of emigration's coin. This is one of these little things that some people like. Remembering. I remember your hair, it's russet gold. We could have sat talking, but the day was cold. I remember your eyes, their fathoms of green. We could have gone walking, but it started to rain. I remember your complexion, the envy of the rose. We could have gone dancing, but the hall was closed. I remember your smile, your exquisite mouth. We could have gone swimming, but the tide was out. Yes, we could have gone swimming, but the tide was out. This, my wife isn't here this evening, thank God. Knut Skinner told me I should read this at every reading, and she says never, ever, ever read that poem. Students, we were both mature students, well, mature according to my birth certificate, but anyway, and it begins with a nice little quotation. I wasn't aware of this until I was run off recently, and I thought it begins with St. John. What I command you is to love one another. We were both mature students at Birkbeck College in London. Brilliant, we were so lucky at the time, yeah? What I remember most of those bedsit days by the imperturbable Thames is waiting for your visit, watching you approach, the sun catching your hair like a raven's wing, and your flowing black dress taking focus like a shadow finding substance with each louder singing step, and the heavenly ascent to the tiny attic room to which your body gave soul, as we unribboned and unwrapped the gift of each other. Frantic fingers busy with the braille of skin, and removing our glasses to study love more closely. I woke up one morning, don't know where this thing came from, and I'm sure you've always had this, and I'm like, where do you hide your goldfish? Where to hide the goldfish? Anyway, I haven't a clue, so I asked some intelligent people, give me a help, where should I hide my goldfish? I don't have a goldfish. Xenophanes was enigmatic, mused, if fish could draw, they would draw their gods like fish. No point asking Socrates, his ignorance would have thrown the question back. Plato did not want the goldfish hidden, how could we compare it with its own ideal form? Aristotle didn't care about the where, but was fixated on the purpose of the hiding. Epicurus' simple guideline was to find a place where the fish would be most happy. Augustine seemed excited, eager to advise, but not yet. Boethius did his best, philosophizing to no avail, it brought little consolation. Aquinas followed Aristotle's template, showing interest in the why, not where, and leavening thought with prayer. Scotus distinguished between substance and form, But regards a hiding place, the subtlety hardly helped. Ocken offered me his razor, insisted, go and ask the goldfish, he'd know best. But the goldfish flashed and flickered, had no wish to hide. I read it in the bubbles. I've always been conscious of the link between famine and emigration and so on, but this is called A Lesser Hunger. And I'm living in Mayo, so I suppose partly away from the famine there. A lesser hunger stalks the land. The coffin ships no longer sail from Cove and the North Wall, their cargo broken bodies, splintered mounds, en route for Liverpool, Toronto, New York. Any port called Hope. And with nothing to declare but pestilence and disease. Left behind, the cobbled quays littered with broken hearts, and the banshees midnight wailing outside cottage doors. Jetting to Heathrow or Kennedy, today's emigrant is not skeletal, doesn't climb aboard with rags and dysentery and typhus, but wheels designer bags and cases packed with confidence and ambition. A different hunger dredges the lining of their stomachs. For one, career's impatient ladder is propped against an elsewhere wall. Another needs to loosen stays of family love. Let the body breathe, grow into itself. A third departs a town of squinting windows. Like Yeats's airmen, some follow irresistible figueres, stirred in the hormone's nest. All are directed to boat or plane by the sat-nav in their DNA. Wakes were for the keys of circa 1845. And yes, pillows are still wet with tears, but temporarily. Today's young migrant will return, be back for Christmas, weddings, the final at Croke Park. Older, many leap the waterfall, swim the river where they were spawned. A lesser hunger stalks the land, a lesser keen pervades. Friends of ours, there were two women in particular, and with the England, I suppose I could say Britain, but essentially England, pulling out from Europe, in a manner of speaking. Two of them. One, her grandmother had to leave Austria to survive because of the war. Another, her grandmother had to leave Germany, and ironically, to get European passports, they're both living in England, to get European passports, one had to apply to Austria and the other had to apply to Germany, and they were broken hearted. To them, it seemed a betrayal, but they had no choice. The girl is applying for a passport in the country her grandmother fled. The country of Kristallnacht and of yellow stars, of train wheels grinding towards concentration camps and smoke. The girl is applying for a passport in the country her grandmother fled. Here we have no broken glass, no yellow stars like targets pinned to coats, no train wheels grinding from London to provincial camps, no smoke. But the girl is applying for a passport in the country her grandmother fled. Perhaps she hears an echo of broken glass. Perhaps her midnight constellations have dimmed. Perhaps she feels the wheels of history are grinding in reverse. Perhaps she is quite sensitive to smoke. This girl applying for a passport in the country her grandmother fled. I am only home. Ireland's always home for me. Limerick is always home for me. But family and so on, we are in Westport, and I came back. I've been working in England for most of my working life, and just thinking about what was familiar and what was different and so on when I come back. And the first place that I was staying was with my daughter, and it was a little place near Westport, and I call this a strange familiarity. A strange familiarity sets the music of returning from across the water. Accents are again the voice of childhood. Names again McCarthy, Walsh, O'Mara.
Premier Margaret, a beautiful reading. Really, really lovely to hear you read. And I think, can we put our hands together for Tim, first of all, on this very special occasion?
And all those who want to embarrass me. Thank you very much for being here. I know you're not here just for me.
And can we also show our gratitude and our appreciation to our two other readers, Thomas and John.
Thanks, Owen. I just want to say congratulations to Tim on his 80th birthday. As Owen mentioned earlier on, we've published 5 collections of his work, and that's one of the reasons why we publish books here in Limerick, is that we want to keep Limerick people and Limerick authors in print all the time. We've also done 5 books for John, and I'd like to give this a little book to Tim as a present. It's signed by all the poets in Limerick that I could get my hands on, and some of the people here tonight. So it's just for you and your birthday.
There is a crossover there, by the way.
Yeah, and of course it wouldn't be a birthday without a birthday cake. I was trying to get a Marilyn Monroe look-alike.
You're nailed it, Tom.
But unfortunately, the dress wouldn't fit me.
From here, it looks like 108.
Thank you. Want to blow out the candles? Will we see? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tim. Happy birthday to you. So we have a few plates here. Hope you all take them.
When you were just a young boy, playing the daylight long, down back that day, to look at back the